Hello and welcome once again to another session of Fronius presentation webinar. Today we will be presenting the topic Fronius products and solution. And with me to present today is my colleague from Kenya, based in Nairobi. That is David Mwangi, who's the technical sales advisor for Eastern Africa. And then, of course, myself, Cyprian Okolo, the technical sales advisor for Western Africa. So together, we will be bringing you this webinar, or you just have to sit back and relax, and hope you enjoy this presentation. First off, of course, we'll have to get through the agenda for today. So to start with, we will be going through inverter history, SnapINverter series, the residential solutions, that is the inverters used for residential solutions. Then we'll now step into inverters used for commercial solutions or systems. And then we'll have a look at the Gen 24 Plus inverters, the Home Pilot, the Fronius Tauros series, which is a new set of inverters that will be coming into the market pretty soon. And then we'll now take a look at smart meters, troubleshooting and support, and of course, a look at further information that we have to provide for you. So, like I earlier said in the agenda, first thing is the inverter history, and how best to describe this other than going through our product portfolio. And as we can see, we've had a wide range of products right from the inception of our very first inverter, that is the Fronius Sunrise, as you can see. Right up to the Fronius Tauros that will be coming in sometime next year. So as you can see, we don't relent and then don't sit back on our oars. We continue to shift the limits in terms of manufacturing products to serve our clients and partners alike to the best of our abilities, of course. Yes, so we'll now be going through the SnapINverter series. And yes, to have a quick look at them, we basically have two sets or two product classes, which are usually the single phase and the three phase. And for the single phase, we have the Galvo that ranges from power class of 1.5 to 3.1 kilowatts. And then the Primo that ranges from power class of 3.0 to 8.2. And then for the three-phase devices or inverters, it ranges from the Simul Hybrid to the Echo, the Fronius Echo. So for the Simul Hybrid, it ranges from power classes of 3 to 5.0 kilowatts. And then for the Simul, we have the small Simul that ranges from 3 to 8.2 power classes. S and M. S simply stands for single Nppt, while M, wherever you see it, it basically stands for multiple Nppt. In this case, double Nppts or 2 Nppts. And then we have the big Simul. The big Simul usually span from power classes of 10 kilowatts to 20 kilowatts. And then, of course, like earlier said, for the Echo, we have two power classes for the Echo. That is the Echo 25 and 27 kilowatts. Good. So let's now tell you a bit about the product application categories, because as we would see now, we have those that are mostly meant for residential solutions and then others for commercial solutions. So for the power classes of 3 to 8.2, and of course the small Simul. And then for commercial solutions, we employ the Simul 10 to 20 power classes. And then, of course, the Echo, which has just two power classes, that is 25 and 27. So there you have it for residential and commercial. Of course, we'll be having a brief look into them respectively. So let's go ahead to the residential SnapINverters meant for residential solutions. Yeah, so basically these are, as earlier said, employing employed for residential purposes. As you can see from the illustration, we have a household with a PV system connected. So with this, you can have it to supply power for you directly, or of course connected to the grid since it's a grid-tied inverter. And then if need be, you can of course connect this via an inverter charger to now charge a battery in case you would need the power for later use. So like earlier said, inverters meant for residential purpose are the Galvo, the Simul, small Simul, and of course the Primal. Now for the Galvo, it ranges from power classes of 1.5 and then 2, 2.5, 3, and 3.1 kilowatts. It has a single Nppt. It's a single phase inverter. And in this case, it's actually a transformer-based inverter, a high frequency transformer. And then efficiency is about 96% and the IP protection class of 65. By the way, for those that don't know, IP simply stands for ingress protection. So protection against ingress, the level of protection is 65. So you can actually check that up to see what it has, the characteristics of IP65. But basically, just to give you a brief overview of the IP65 class, so it can actually be installed outdoors because it is protected against dust and of course protected against jet water. By jet water, I mean it can be installed outside, so even under the rain, it can of course be installed, and you can be assured that you won't have any ingress of water particles into the inverter. So, but having said that, it doesn't mean that we'll have to maybe plunge it into a swimming pool to test that. So that will be, of course, not protected. It's only the protection it has only against jet water, that is sprayed water. Okay, so let's move ahead to the Simul, a small Simul that ranges from power class of 3 to 8.2. So we have them in the, excuse me, we have them in the 3, 3.7, 4.5, 5.0, 6, 7, and 8.2 kilowatts. This time around, it has 2 Nppt trackers. It's a 3-phase inverter, and it's a transformerless inverter. So it's transformerless based inverter, and as you can see, has an increased efficiency compared to the transformer-based inverter. So its efficiency is 98%, and also has an protection class of IP65. So we now go to the single phase, the Primal, 3 to 8.2. As you can see, the power classes from 3 to 8.2. It also has double Nppt. As earlier said, it's a single phase inverter, transformerless topology, and same efficiency as the small Simuls, 98%, and the same protection class, IP65. So let's now take a look at SnapInverters meant for commercial systems or commercial solutions. So we have them in the Simul and in the Echo. So for the Simul, it ranges from 10, 12.5, 15, 17.5, and 20 kilowatts power classes. Double Nppt tracker, yes, double Nppt tracker. Of course, in this case, of course, you can connect the 2x3 strings, and then has a Superflex Design. And if we have a look at the features here, which we will be discussing eventually in subsequent slides, we can see that there's just one difference between the Simul and the Echo. By the way, the Echo has a power class of 25 and 27 kilowatts. So these are usually optimized for commercial systems. And since it has just one Nppt tracker, as much as 6 strings can be connected to this particular Nppt. So, like I said, there's just one feature that differentiates the Simul from the Echo, which is the Superflex Design. So this is the symbol. We shall be discussing about this subsequently in the following slides. Yeah. Great. So these commercial-based inverters, of course, can be employed for large-scale commercial systems that can, of course, range from 50 kilowatts and, of course, well into the megawatt range. We shall be showing you references where these inverters are actually employed for commercial purposes. Yeah. So, and the beauty is that these inverters can be combined in a smart way to provide all you need in terms of a commercial solution. Because of its high flexibility in design, no additional components that are needed, like a DC combiner. Of course, we'll see that later. And in this case, per ring, you only need just one master inverter for communication purposes. And of course, with this, you definitely have a cost optimized solution. So yeah, these inverters would not be able to perform this way without the attributes that we are about to tell you about. So we will now be looking at the attributes of these inverters that makes them so special. So to start with is the easy installation and service. Because of its SnapINverter concept, you have the wall-mounted bracket that has the connection points, both AC and DC. So all you need to do once you mount the wall mount bracket, and the next thing you need to do is to insert or of course snap in the inverter module, and of course electrical connection will be established between the DC and the AC points. And with this, of course, when when all the installation instructions are abided to, of course, wouldn't take you more than 7 minutes to install. Yeah, so yeah, it's an inverter made for every location, be it hot or cold, because it can be mounted in places of ambient temperature from -25 to up to 60 degrees Celsius. With an active cooling concept, it prevents hotspots and of course guarantees a long lifespan of inverters. And of course, an inverter has a high protection class, IP65 and 66 in some cases. And there's one thing I'd like to bring to our attention here, the relationship between the temperature and the lifespan of inverters. So for every 10 degrees Celsius increase in temperature, it results to halving of the lifespan of the inverter. So that is why we take the temperature coefficient very, very seriously, and work towards ensuring that the inverter operates optimally at all times. So talking about the ventilation concept, we basically employ the use of output regulated fans. So these fans basically employ a simple rule of physics, knowing fully well that cold air is denser than hot air. So we have fans situated below and above the inverter. So what happens is that the cold air is actually sucked in from below, as you can see from the sides. So these fans can actually be either 2 or 3, depending on the capacity or size of the inverter. So, but basically, cold air is sucked in from the side below the inverter, and then hot air is let out from the top. So by so doing, you have a well-regulated airstream that flows from the side and then flows to the upper part of the inverter. By so doing, all the power electronics don't get overheated, and then of course this helps them to make the inverter function optimally at all times. Great. So with this, we're able to achieve what we call a high derating value. So for competitors that have their inverters passively cooled, we can see that they begin to derate at a much earlier stage, in this case about 30 degrees Celsius. But our inverters actually go 100%, as in operating optimally, up to about an ambient temperature of about 50%. And this actually coincides with heat sink temperature of about 75 to 80 degrees Celsius. So it is only when it gets to this stage that it begins to derate. So as you can see, it's really, really rugged inverter that can, of course, withstand adverse temperature coefficient values. Good. So let's now talk about the Superflex design. For this, we have a wide range of input voltage, 80 to 1000 or 150 to 1000 for the primals and simuls respectively. For dimensioning, we can actually have from 6 up to 24 modules per string, 4 in the case of small inverters, as earlier described. And of course, odd numbers of modules are possible because of its flexibility. So you're not actually restrained to a particular order of installation of modules, which is of course an increased or an added advantage. And again, we can actually over dimension our inverters up to 150%. And then of course, this is made possible because of its ruggedity, and then of course the presence of 2 Nppt trackers. That is for the M version, and also of course for the S version also. Great. So in terms of dimension, to explain what we mean by a Superflex design, the more, you can have unsymmetric distribution. And in this case, as you can see from this particular description, we have most of the inverters, most of the modules, excuse me, installed on the side of the roofing that has more cross-sectional area. And then we'll have a lesser installation on the side that has a lesser installation space. So as you can see, by so doing, it doesn't have any effect on the inverter. Of course, it produces evenly and of course outputs power optimally. And then of course, we can also have a symmetric distribution by so doing. If you have maybe east-west orientation and evenly distribute the modules equally, of course, this doesn't stop the inverter from operating. It can actually operate both for unsymmetric and symmetric distribution, which is of course a very, very big plus on our inverter capabilities. So let's now talk about more yield on shaded groups. This is made possible by an algorithm, the Dynamic Peak Manager algorithm, which is a new Nppt tracker algorithm that is meant or designed for maximum yield, even in shaded conditions. So what it does basically is to locate the best operating power point even under shading conditions. And of course, this yields or this leads to a higher yield because of its flexibility. To explain more about this, let's have a look at Dynamic Peak Manager chart. Yeah, so I just got an indication that there's an issue with the audio. So please, if you have any audio issue, please use the hand symbol there to indicate, but I believe maybe it might be due to some internet interruptions per se. So let's continue with the Dynamic Peak Manager. So as you can see from the graph here, we can see that there are 3 charts or 3 graphs, one indicating optimum performance, that is the production or power output, PV power output without shade. And then now we have shaded conditions for different times, that is at 9 a.m. and 8 a.m., all both with shading conditions. So okay, good. So I can see that we're all good in terms of the audio. So for the Dynamic Peak Manager, what it does is to automatically scan along the curve, the production curve, and if there is any shading, it scans along the production curve and then automatically aligns itself. It detects and aligns itself to the highest power production point, as we can see here. So instead of giving you or producing at the LMPP, which is the local MPP point, it now automatically through the scanning now shifts to the GMPP, which is the global MPP, and then provides or produces power on that particular settings. So as you can see, it automatically adjusts the voltage, which corresponds to a change in current. And of course, this of course leads to a higher output power. So having said that, we also have residential inverter options, which includes DC protection, DC surge protection, which basically comes in the Type 1 and Type 2 version. It is a retrofit kit, and of course, this means that it does not, we don't have it ex-factory, so it's optional accessory. But of course, with the need for DC protection, always it's advisable that you have it installed. So all you need to do is to have the serial number and then order it from your wholesalers. So let's now talk a bit about the topology for commercial systems. So it can either come pre-combined or directly. So for centralized connections, you can have all the connections done using a DC combiner box and then come with larger diameter cables and then connect to the AC panel for onwards transformation. But then you can also have it decentralized, that is connected directly to the inverters, and then you can now travel with the AC connection to your AC panel and of course to the transformer. So options for commercial system exist because we also have DC protection over voltage protection. We have DC connector kit, which helps you to connect larger diameter cables. And then of course we have string fuses, all with their respective specifications. So the advantage that Fronius provides is that in terms of power produced with respect to weight, we have the advantage here. Because as you can see, comparison between Fronius Echo and 3 other competitors, all producing the same amount of power. Well, as you can see here, the weight, the power production per weight, we have the Fronius with, of course, the advantage because it weighs way less. In some point, at some point, half of the weight of some of our particular competitors, as we can see here. So this proves to you how much work we put into our inverter to make sure that you have the best possible inverter in both size and output capabilities. Yes, we've talked about the active cooling. Let's now look at reference, like I promised you. So because of high energy costs and statutory situation regarding zero feeding, this means that the entire solar energy yield from this plant, as you can see, is located in the Philippines with capacity of up to 4.77 megawatts roof-mounted system. So this is being used for self-consumption. And of course, as I told you, we can see how our inverters actually employed to achieve this purpose. We also have one of our largest installations in Ukraine, which is about 52 megawatts. Of course, we also have the details here. Yeah, so basically we'll now go through the installation process of our inverters. It doesn't really require much. All you need, maybe at some cases, just a screwdriver, your installation manual, and of course your USB stick in case you have to do some updates or upgrading, software upgrading. Good. So first thing, install the wall mount bracket, carry out the DC and AC connections, snap in your inverter, screw the inverter onto the wall mount bracket, and then of course turn on the DC switch, and you're done with the installation. It's as easy as that. Great. So in terms of installation location, we have, sorry, let me go one step back. We have do's and don'ts in terms of the location for installation. Like I said earlier, it can be installed outside, so it can also, it of course can withstand rain. But then it is better to install it under shaded conditions, maybe, or as we normally have in most cases, under the modules themselves. That is for outdoor or ground-mounted installations, thereby preventing it from direct impact from the sun. Because if it happens, you're going to have increased temperature, which might affect the ambient temperature, and then of course might affect the output of the inverter in terms of derating. It can be installed at altitude of up to 2,000 meters above sea level. Beyond that, you're definitely going to have issues with the DC operating voltage. So for industrial areas, because of the toxicity of some of the substances or components used in industries, please, we are advised that inverters don't come in contact with such toxic materials. And because of the noise of, well, the noise is not that much from the fan, but some, we understand that some are quite sensitive to fan sound. So it's advised not to be installed in hospital wards or in living rooms. And of course, not places exposed to dusty surfaces. Of course, not in farmhouses because of the ammonia, which is a main component of the byproduct of animals. Not also in greenhouses, because these are mostly enclosed spaces. And then, of course, in such enclosed spaces, we normally have high temperature or high ambient temperatures. Yeah, it can also be installed on the wall. All you need to do is to have the installation kit that is required for such, as can be seen. And then in terms of inverter or mounting orientation, we can see the do's and the don'ts. Please. Okay, yeah, so of course we can see the expected and not expected mounting orientations. Let's now go over to the clearance. We can see the clearance necessary for both small inverters and big inverters. Because of time constraints, I'll have to be a bit fast so that I can hand over to my colleague to continue with the other parts of the presentation. So we can now see the different ways that the connection point on the wall mount bracket are situated. So from the disconnection, DC disconnection point to the strain relief to the Nppp plus for Npp1 and Npp2, and then of course the minus or negative terminals, and of course the AC termination screws. So we also have preparations already made in case you're coming in with larger cables or conventional cables for connection, ranging from 2.5 mm to 16 mm. And then, of course, we can go as far as higher cable sizes, which can, of course, go for up to 21 mm diameter, cable diameter. Good. So we can now see perforations made for connections on the DC point. So if you're coming in connecting directly to the inverters, you can of course use the smaller terminals, terminal perforations. If you're coming in with big cables, that's when you employ DC combiner boxes, you will of course have to use bigger diameter perforations. Yeah. So our inverters can also come already pre-connected like this. So it's all based on what you wish. So it's optional. And then I would now have to go through the startup assistance or startup procedure. So it's not much to it. Once you start up your inverter, go through the simple commissioning process, choose your language, choose your setup, make your time and date settings, and then you're done. So we have hidden menus, as you can see, the keys or the codes for basic menu, country setup menu, error menu, key lock menu, and for the Pro menu, because of the sensitivity of the settings here, you would have to contact tech support to be able to access these codes. Yeah, so in terms of servicing, servicing basically implies maybe an update, which is usually done via a memory stick or USB stick. PC board replacement is of course possible, and these replacements are easily done within 1 minute. Great. So at this point, I will be handing over to my colleague, David Mwangi, who will be presenting the rest part of the webinar. So David, I will now be handing over presentation rights to you so that you can now continue. So.
Okay, thank you so much, Cyprian, for the first part of the presentation. Thank you for sharing a lot of good information on our existing SnapINverter series of inverters. Now, I'll be taking our participants today through our relatively new generations of inverters. And we will be starting with the Fronius Gen 24 Plus inverter. So the Fronius Gen 24 inverter, of course, this is an inverter that we are very excited about. It's a uniquely versatile inverter. It has many capabilities in terms of system configurations and what can be achieved in terms of energy sector integration. And I would like to mention that today we are just going through very brief details of these particular inverters. And we do have, or we can plan for dedicated sessions where we go into in-depth details on each of these inverters and the solutions capable with each one of them. So the Fronius Gen 24 Plus inverters, of course, do come in 2 variations, just like the SnapINverter series. We do have the 3-phase inverter, or what we refer to as the Simul Gen 24. It comes with 2 Nppt inputs. 1 Nppt is, of course, with a bit higher power handling capacity of about 25 amps. And the next interface for Nppt can handle up to 12.5 amps. Power classes for the 3-phase Simul Gen 24 Plus from 6 kilowatts to 10 kilowatts. And then it has a battery input. So this is now going into battery storage. As my colleague had mentioned before, if you do require battery storage with the SnapINverter series, you, in most cases, will have to do an AC coupled configuration. But with a Gen 24 Plus inverter, you have the possibility to incorporate battery storage through the provided battery input. So this Gen 24 Simul inverter, the 10 kilowatt, is already available in the market, was available for ordering starting end of Q2 this year. And then the other variations from 6 to 8 will be available from Q1 of 2021. The single phase Gen 24 Plus inverter comes also with 2 MPPTs. 1 MPPT can be connected up to 22 amps of current, and the other one can take up to 12.5. Power classes available from 3 to 6 kilowatts. And also it comes with a battery input similar to the Simul hybrid, to the Simul Gen 24 Plus of up to 22 amps. So available also starting Q1 of 2021. Now here we look at the key features and the possibilities for the Gen 24 Plus inverters, whether single phase or the 3-phase variations. And one of the key compatibilities is with a gadget that we're going to look at also briefly later that we call the Fronius OnPilot. And this Fronius OnPilot can be used for thermal storage, meaning that using excess PV energy, you can steplessly control a heating element. So stepless means basically controlling anything from, let's say, 100 watts up to 9 kilowatts, which is the maximum handling capacity of the Fronius OnPilot. And therefore, if you do not desire to have battery storage, then you can maximize your self-consumption by storing this excess energy thermally in water. The next compatibility aspect or feature is with a battery system. And as I have already mentioned, we have now the possibility with the Gen 24 Plus to connect a lithium iron phosphate battery. And this is where you need to be a bit careful with connection, or when you are specifying battery storage for Gen 24 Plus inverters. We have a compatibility list in our website, and if you require, this also can be sent to you, so that you know exactly which batteries can be used with which version of the Gen 24 Plus inverters. So at the moment, the battery that we recommend mostly is the BYD battery box HVS or HVM. And these batteries can also be connected modularly to meet your power requirements. The Gen 24 Plus inverters also have one key special feature, which is the PV point. This is basically a basic power backup function, and it's integrated as standard in all the Gen 24 Plus inverters. And with this PV point, you do not need any additional or special installations to achieve a backup functionality with the inverter. So no battery is required in this case, therefore meaning that all the PV power that you have generated when there's a grid outage can be directed to a maximum of 3 kilowatts through the PV point. So we're going to look also briefly into the PV point for you to get some good understanding of it. So in a nutshell, the basic backup function of the PV point looks like this. So as I mentioned before, it is integrated as standard in the Gen 24 Plus inverters. The maximum output of the PV point, whether for the three-phase or single-phase devices, the Gen 24 Plus inverters, is a maximum of 3 kilowatts, but it has the potential to give you inrush power of maximum 4.1 kilowatts for 5 seconds. And this would be quite helpful when you're starting things that are inductive in consumption, such as motors and stuff like that. So the Gen 24 will supply the PV point in case of a grid outage, and it has a designated output in the inverter that you cannot mistake for any other connection. So it makes it very easy because you do not require any other grid separation. So what would happen is for you to dedicate a special circuit of loads that you want to be powered when there is a grid outage. And therefore, in terms of integrating this backup function of the Gen 24 becomes relatively easy compared to the normal procedure of retrofitting battery or inverter chargers into a backup kind of system. So the combination is also possible with a battery system. So if you have a battery system integrated, and this is how a normal setup would look like. So you have a Gen 24 inverter connected to a PV array, and then you could have a battery storage or not. Then in case there is a grid failure, the Gen 24 takes this maximum of 3 kilowatts directly from the PV system and is feeding all the loads that are connected to the PV point. At the same time, if you are to have a battery system in the Gen 24 connected and there's a grid outage, you could also have the excess of energy that is available after feeding the PV point going for recharging the battery. Also, if you have the battery system integrated and the solar panels are not generating what is required by the PV point, then the deficit can be met by taking a bit of energy or power from the batteries to feed into the battery, the PV point as well. And therefore, this ensures that you have a very basic and quick backup function or functionality with the Gen 24 Plus inverters, and is actually one of the very few grid-tied inverters that can offer this kind of functionality, that they are able to function when there is a grid outage. In terms of a full backup, this is also possible with the Gen 24 inverters. Also, a very special feature is the fact that the Gen 24 inverters, the three-phase models, are one of the only very few inverters in the market whereby you can get a real three-phase power backup output. Most of the other inverters do require that you have more than at least 3 inverters connected in series for you to get three-phase output from the inverter system as backup. So with this kind of installation, it will be very easy for you to configure a real three-phase backup for small offices or small factory setups. And therefore, this would ensure that you get maximum energy independence from the grid. What I should mention here as a quick fact for you, something that you need to bear in mind always, is the fact that the Gen 24 Plus inverter is not a UPS kind of inverter whereby you have instantaneous transfer from grid failure to battery consumption. because it's a grid-tied inverter and must respect some grid codes for different countries. The Gen 24 inverter has a time lag of about 60 seconds between grid failure and when you are switched to power to the batteries. But on grid return, then the connection back to the grid is seamless. So that kind of measurement does not need to happen when you are connecting back to the grid after a grid failure. So having said all that, the Gen 24 also offers us a very unique possibility for something that we call multi-flow energy utilization. And this multi-flow technology is integrated also as a standard in the Gen 24 inverters, whether single phase or three phase. And it basically means that we can have power flowing in multiple directions, as we can see in this graphic here, that we have a possibility to generate PV power. At the same time, we are drawing from the battery system if what is coming from the PV power is not sufficient. We could also have an independent source of AC power, maybe a wind generator or a third-party inverter. And this is also feeding into the Gen 24 inverter in an AC coupled configuration. And this is consequently supplying the required or the connected load at that particular point. So now let's look at the OnPilot, which is another exciting product from Fronius that you can make a lot of use to generate hot water. As I had mentioned before, this OnPilot is going to significantly increase your self-consumption rate by stepwise controlling all the excess energy that you might have available in your PV installation. So a quick example that I like to give quite often is in Africa, we have quite a number of farming institutions, and most of these have huge greenhouses whereby they are growing quite a number of horticultural products. And depending on the time of use, you could have so much excess energy. And considering that there is so many people working in these flower farms, you could actually save a lot of money when you're generating hot water for these people to use when they finish up their shifts by utilizing excess energy. And the way to do this would be to integrate or to retrofit the Fronius OnPilot into that kind of system and ensure that all the excess energy stepwise from 0 to 9 kilowatts, as I had mentioned before, in both single and three phase, is fed into a heating element for generating heat water. This gadget, as the name refers to, is an OnPilot. So basically it means it's for controlling only ohmic loads. So this will not work with appliances that have electronics inside. So it can work with all heating rods, infrared heating panels, and towel dryers and similar loads. So this is something that I would also encourage you to check with us. And when you're designing your systems, once you monitor through Fronius SolarWeb and realize that you have so much excess energy, it can be another business opportunity for you to go back to your customers and tell them, if we do integrate a Fronius OnPilot, we can do or achieve ABCD in terms of increasing self-consumption and self-sufficiency in energy, and therefore you become more energy independent and so forth. So, and this is a typical setup how the Fronius OnPilot is going to work. So, assuming that we have a generation of about 1,500 watts from the Fronius SnapINverter, we have a connected load of 1,000 watts or 1 kilowatts. And typically, if you're allowed to set power to the grid or you are allowed to feed in solar power to the grid, then 500 watts in this case, because your load is only taking 1,000 watts, would basically go to the grid. If not, then the inverter would throttle down to feed you only how much the load is consuming at this point. However, by adding the Fronius OnPilot, then you're able to divert or to increase the production of the Fronius SnapINverter and direct this excess 500 watts for feeding or generating hot water. So this is something that would be quite useful once you start thinking about other applications outside of just generating power that can be achieved. And this, we are talking more specifically about battery storage and also thermal storage of energy. So this is a typical energy flow example with using the Gen 24 now in combination with the OnPilot. So we can see that with the Gen 24 Plus, we are able to prioritize which are our important energy, critical energy areas. So in this kind of setup, we have given priority 1 to the battery system, whereby we say, if, of course, the load is always priority number 1, but in terms of now setting up, how do you want to utilize all the excess energy? We can say our priority number 1 would be making sure that the battery system is completely charged. Then if we still do have excess energy and we have integrated a Fronius on-pilot, then we say priority number 2 would be feeding the on-pilot with the excess energy to generate hot water. And if we still have even more excess energy after hot water has been generated, because what I should mention here is that the Fronius on-pilot is also connected with a PT1000 temperature sensor. And once you have achieved your temperature, it means that the Fronius on-pilot is not going to be consuming any more extra excess energy. And therefore, that priority can also be set using the digital IOs. As I mentioned before, we can have some very dedicated sessions where we look up at the very specific application features of the different inverters. So the digital IOs is something that we can cover in a separate training for the Gen 24 and also for the SnapINverter series. So going further, so advantages already covered this, so we do not need to go back into this. As I mentioned, the Fronius on-pilot can handle stepless control of single phase and 3-phase power up to 9 kilowatts. In single phase, maximum is 3 kilowatts, and in 3-phase, you can control up to 9 kilowatts. You can also control 1 or 2 heating elements separately. So one element will have priority depending on excess energy available and also depending on the temperature thresholds that have been set. So let's now go into the new, also very exciting inverter, that is the Tauros series. The Tauros will be available starting Q1, end of Q1 or beginning of, mid Q2 next year, 2021. And this is also something that is very, very exciting for Fronius, because now we have an inverter that we can boldly say now fits very well into, let's say, almost utility scale projects or slightly smaller. And the Tauros series is the smart and robust commercial inverter that we want our partners to use for maximized profit. So I'm going to give you very brief details about the Tauros series, and also we can also discuss this in details in a separate training. So the power classes for the Tauros will be 50 and 100 kilowatts. And then in terms of the PV array that you can connect to each of these inverters, will be a maximum of 75 kilowatt peak for the 50 kilowatt inverter and 150 kilowatt peak for the 100 kilowatt inverter. Maximum DC input range would be up to 1,000 volts, and protection class of IP65 that also has some very special features because once you look at the Tauros, it will be quite different in terms of even construction and design compared to either the Gen 24 and the existing SnapINverter series. In terms of weight, we are talking about 80 to 105 for the 50 and 100 kilowatt inverters respectively. So, so let's look at a bit more specific details about the two inverters, the 50 kilowatt and the 100 kilowatt inverter Tauros. So as you can see here, the construction of the inverter is slightly different, as I have mentioned. So this is the area that is containing the power stack. And then the 50 kilowatt inverter has two DC switches. So you have two possibilities whereby you can switch off your DC power independently. Looking at the 100 kilowatt version, you still have the power stack. If you look at the 50 kilowatt, we have one power stack, and the 100 kilowatt is coming with two power stacks. So that is giving the advantage that if one power stack has an issue, then the inverter can continue to perform at half the capacity. In terms of DC disconnection, we are talking about 2 to 3 DC switches for the 100 kilowatt version. And also other specific terms to understand with the Tauros series are what we are referring to here as pre-combined, or the P version, and also the D version. The pre-combined and the D version is something that you can also look at briefly in the next few slides, just for you to get some good understanding. So the pre-combined version means that from where you're connecting your PV system, you are coming with two big DC cables, plus and minus, and those are lining a much longer distance from the PV installation than you'd have when you connect your inverter just next to the PV array. And therefore, also, if you look at this installation here, the AC connection cable from the inverter to the transformer, or the point of interaction, or what we call the feeding point, is much shorter. In contrast, when you look at the decentral kind of configuration, we're talking about an inverter that has the capability for you to connect all the string connections directly to the inverter. And then from the inverter, we are running with a much longer distance of AC cabling, therefore meaning that for a pre-combined version or a centralized version, the AC cabling will be much thinner in cross-section than the decentral version, because the version here will have a cable running for a much longer distance in the AC connection. So, and this is the major difference, as you can see in these two visuals here. So the central design will be capable to take up to 90 mm DC cables. And in this setup, we are not going to be requiring the DC or the string fuses, because the DC combiner box should be handling the string protection with the appropriate fuses. When you talk about the direct, whereby we are connecting the strings directly to the inverter, we can see we have quite a number of MC4 plugs provided for the inverter. There will be between 14 to 21, depending on the version of the inverter that you are going to take. Also, the string fuses will be integrated, either 15 or 20 amps per string. So what can we talk about the Tauro as far as the special attributes are concerned? So just to highlight for you, is first of all that the Tauro is extremely robust, and this is for unprotected outdoor areas. As I had mentioned before, the design of the Tauro inverter is very, very different from the SnapINverter series. And the front cover, or the front area, is actually a double layered kind of design, whereby this inverter, even when you operate it under the exposure of sunlight, can continue to give you maximum power output without derating. Also, ease of installation, design flexibility. This inverter will have a maximum of 3 Nppt, and therefore, in terms of flexibility of design, this is something that would be very unique to the Fronius Tauros series. Ease of maintenance. Also, the power stacks will be very easy to remove and to refit, and therefore, we do envision a situation whereby each Fronius Tauro inverter can be maintained by a single technician on site, depending on which spare part has to be replaced. And then system monitoring and hardware, everything is on board, just like the Fronius SnapINverter and Gen 24. The major difference also here is that the Fronius Tauro is utilizing the pilot. So as you know, the SnapINverter series is using the data manager for communication, but the Fronius Tauro and the Gen 24 Plus inverters are utilizing something now that we call the pilot. So that is already integrated as standard in the Fronius Tauro. And then, of course, the key highlight is the fact that there will be possibility of BOS, or balance of system cost reduction, due to the AC daisy chaining capability of the Tauro series of inverter. So, and this AC daisy chaining is something that we also want you to understand in details, and how this can affect the costing of your AC cabling, especially because you can connect up to 200 kilowatts of inverters in series or in parallel using the AC cabling. And therefore, this means that you can connect up to 4 50 kilowatt Tauros and up to 200 kilowatt Tauros. Let's now look at the Tauro reference. We can talk about one very special installation in Greece. And this is where the very first production inverters for the Tauro series were installed as a test or pilot project. And this is an area called Kostaria, Greece. The size of the installation is 1 megawatt peak and is a field installation. And in this installation, we have 7 Fronius Tauros Echo 50. This is the direct version. And then so the direct version, as you can see here, is an inverter that now you can connect the string cables directly to the inverter. And we also have 6 Fronius Tauros Echo 100 also direct version. So that brings to a total of just about 101 megawatt. In terms of the number of modules, we are talking about 345 watt peak, 2,898 pieces. And the annual yield in this installation is approximately 1,500 megawatt hours. So already you can see, as this installation was done late 2018, we have already gathered a lot of useful information about the Tauro. And once we start selling this inverter into the market, we are very, very sure that it is going to be extremely successful. Moving on now to the Fronius smart meters. Let's give you a bit of info about the available smart meters. So we have the old version smart meters. And the smart meters, of course, are used in conjunction with all grid-tied installations for a number of things that we are going to look at later. But in a nutshell, we have 2 variations of smart meters. We have the single phase and 3-phase residential smart meters, as we can see here. So we are having 63 and 63 amp single and 3-phase meters. And also we have an old version of 50 kilo amp 3-phase commercial meter. We do have now a new series of smart meters that we're calling Smart Meter TS, or the Fronius Smart Meter Touchscreen. And the biggest difference will, of course, be the display, as you're going to look at later. But as I mentioned before, the reason you need the smart meter is, of course, it offers the basis for monitoring and visualization of data in Fronius SolarWeb. And it's for monitoring an energy efficient flow control. As I mentioned before, once you want to think about integrating something like Fronius OnPilot, then a Fronius smart meter becomes a central component in that setup, because it's going to tell you how much excess energy depending on load consumption that you're having, and therefore which other additional components or gadgets that you can retrofit into your systems. So the Fronius smart meter is, of course, a bidirectional meter, and this is able to measure and differentiate between consumption and also power that you borrow from the grid, and also feed in energy. Looking specifically at the Fronius new smart meter series, the touch screen, we have also here 3 types. We have 100 amps single phase for residential use. We also have 65 amps 3-phase for residential use. And the cable cross section that you can feed to either 100 amps or 65 amp residential smart meters is up to 16 millimeter square. For commercial applications, we are talking about a 5 kilo amp smart meter in 3-phase with a maximum cross section cable possibility of 4 millimeter square. And the reason for this is that you do require external CTs for current measurement. So both the 100 amp and the 65 amp, also for the older version of the smart meters, you can measure directly the current consumed, but for the commercial smart meter, you need external CTs to be able to handle that current safely. In terms of the differences between the 2 smart meters, the old and the new series, we can try to highlight what are the differences here for you. In terms of the connection, when you're doing the setup of the smart meter, for the older version of smart meter, you need an actual physical termination resistor. Whereas for the new smart meter, all you need is a termination cable. So you're going to be doing a bridging connection between dedicated or designated terminals, and that achieves the 120 ohms required for termination. And the other major difference would be the dimension units. The older version of the smart meter is slightly bigger than the new version. So we can see here that we have 3 dimension units for the smart meter TS, the touch screen. And then we have 4 dimension units for the older version smart meter. And therefore, it means that when you're installing this new smart meter into a control panel somewhere, you require slightly less space than the older version. Also, in terms of the display here, you can see the biggest difference, because the new smart meter will have a big LCD display. The older version had what we call an LCD display that did not have the navigation buttons integrated. the navigation buttons for the new TS touchscreen meter are already integrated into the smart meter display. So also one very important use of the Fronius smart meter is for zero feeding control, because in most countries where feeding of solar power is not allowed to the grid, you need the smart meter to be able to achieve this setting or this limitation. So this is done when you're adding your smart meter in the inverter web interface or the configuration interface of the inverter. And all you do is to allow dynamic power reduction when you come to the digital or the DNO editor of the inverter interface. And you say limit for the entire system. Then you enter how much DC power you have installed in the system. And then you say maximum grid feeding, maximum is 0%. So in this case, you are going to be feeding 0 power into the grid because we are doing zero feeding kind of limitation here. So that is one very important use of the Fronius smart meter. Let's go further and look at how we offer you support when you're using Fronius products. I'm excited to talk to you about our new Fronius apps, starting with what you're calling the Fronius Solar.start. And this is the commissioning app. So this is something that you can download either from Google Play Store or Apple Store. And this allows you to very quickly commission your systems from your mobile devices. Also, we have a new look SolarWeb app, and this allows for monitoring of your various systems, depending on, regardless of where they are installed, as long as they have an internet connection. And also something that is very, very important for installers is Solar.sos or the Solar Online Support. So this is a service app, and this allows all our installers to be able to troubleshoot their systems without necessarily making a call to Fronius. In the past, you required a customer number for you to be able to register for this Solar.sos app service. But now, because we have it available as a phone app, all you need is to go through a registration process once you download it, and you can be able to diagnose all the faults that you may encounter with your inverters without having to contact Fronius tech support. And therefore, that ensures the uptime of the systems that you have installed is as high as possible. So please check from whichever phone that you're using, the app store for that phone. You can easily download all of these apps, and they are going to be very, very helpful for your installations. The replacement process of the Fronius inverters and the spare parts required is very, very easy, and we like to keep it that way, simple. So the end customer in most cases might notice an error or a problem with the system. And if not, then the installer, through proactive monitoring through SolarWeb, can, even before the end customer notices there is a problem, notice that there is an issue, and therefore they are going to go into the SOS tool for diagnosis. And if it's something that they cannot handle on their own, then we have a dedicated Fronius technical support department in Austria, and our partners have priority when they do call tech support. And with tech support, you're able to discuss all pertinent issues regarding any problems you might be having, and therefore have a recommendation of the spare parts that you can exchange for any particular inverter. And therefore, through this cycle, we ensure that all our systems have the highest uptime as possible compared to any other inverter manufacturers. So this is something also that we are very, very proud of, that we have put at your disposal very good tools for diagnosis, and also a dedicated tech support department that handles all the complicated questions that you might have. So also we have, in terms of additional support, a system that you call the Fronius System Partners, or a program that we call the Fronius System Partners, whereby we qualify partners who have been installing Fronius products. And once they become qualified, then they can also be listed in the Fronius website, whereby all end users looking for Fronius installers can easily find their details in the Fronius website. And of course, this gives them a lot of confidence when they see that Fronius has actually recognized the partners in the field as competent installers of our products and solutions. Also, in terms of extra support, lead generally, we have different technical sales advisors. Myself, Mohamed Sidat, who is not with us today, and also Cyprian in Western Africa. And we're able to give you very dedicated support on issues regarding design or application of the different products and solutions, and also basic technical support in terms of resolving issues that you might have with your systems in the field. As I mentioned before, the tech support area department is also something that we are very proud of, and is able to offer global support for all our customers. So the big question would be, for all new installers who have not used Fronius before, the big question would be, why Fronius? And we answer this proudly by saying that we have done this over 1 million times. So Fronius has been in the business of making grid-tie inverters for the last now 28 years. And we have over 1 million SnapINverters already operating in the field. So this already tells you that we have a lot of success with the grid-tied inverters, the SnapINverter series. And this, you can see that when you're marking the 1 millionth inverter, we actually produced a golden inverter. So we produced 3 of these inverters that were dispatched to different parts of the world. And you can follow how these inverters were utilized and the transportation routes through the information captured in the Fronius website. So we invite you to also partake in our pride of the 1 millionth inverter and how these have been applied in different parts of the world. In addition to that, as I mentioned, we are in this business now 28 years, and quality has been one of the key pillars of Fronius. It's a family-owned business. That means that for the last 75 years, the company has been very stable because family ownership ensures that the company is not running into headwinds of competition because of shares and stuff like that. Then we have international support, and of course, the key concepts of energy flow management. As we have shared with you, the Gen 24 Plus is actually one unique inverter that ensures we have this concept of energy flow management maximized, very well captured in this inverter. So, almost coming to our to the end of our training for today, the webinar for today. So, just to give you our contact information, if you do require to get in touch with us, my colleague in South Africa, Mohamed Sidat, the contact details are here for my colleague Cyprian Okolo and also for myself. And also, if you have any other specific questions regarding Fronius products, then you can very easily get in touch with all the different sections of Fronius at any time. And with that, I think we have come to the end of our webinar for today. I would like to thank you very much for taking your time to attend our webinar today. And we do look forward to welcoming you to our other webinar series starting from next year, because this is our last webinar for 2020. And we hope that throughout this webinar series that we've done for 2020, you have gotten a lot of useful information, and look forward to working with you into 2021 and beyond. So thank you so much, and we wish you a very good day. Cyprian, do you have any open issues that we can address at this point?
So far, so good. No questions at all, which is a good feedback. All the same, meaning that the information was well passed. So I also want to say a big thank you to all the attendees. Thanks for paying attention to our webinar and for following us through right from the inception of this webinar for Sub-Saharan Africa. So thank you once again, and see you next year.